The palm oil was the color of sunset, and she poured it the way some people pour wine, with a slow wrist and a steady eye, and the specific knowledge that the pour was the sale. Mama Effiong had sold palm oil from spot number 47 in Mushin Market for 40 years. Same spot, same table, a wooden board on 2 concrete blocks that she had reinforced once in 2003 after a rainstorm split one block in half. Same brass measuring cup, dented on the left side from a fall in 1997. Same plastic funnel, same bottles lined in rows of 5. Same arrangement, fresh palm oil on the left, refined on the right. The special blend, the one she made herself, filtered through muslin, rested for 2 weeks. The one the market women called Mama's Gold, in the center. She was 73. She had arrived at this spot at 17 when her mother had died and left her 3 liters of palm oil and a location. The location was worth more than the oil. In Mushin Market, the spot was everything. Your customers knew where you were, your suppliers knew where to deliver, and the market association knew whose payments were current. Moving was impossible. Disappearing was worse. So she hadn't moved. Not during the market fire of 1989, when she'd stood with a bucket and saved her table while stalls on either side burned. Not during the flood of 1995, when the water came up to her knees and she'd sold palm oil standing in it. Not during the political violence of 2003, when the market closed for 2 weeks and she'd slept beside her table on a mat because leaving meant someone else would claim the spot. She was short, round, dark brown skin that had the texture of something weathered and preserved, like wood that had been polished by rain rather than damaged by it. Her hands were the map of her work, oil smooth, strong. The palms permanently stained the amber of a woman who had handled palm oil for longer than most of her customers had been alive. She was at her table at 5 a.m. every morning. She left at 6 p.m. Between those hours, she sold, she poured, she talked. She arbitrated disputes between neighboring stallholders with the authority of a woman who had been in the same place longer than the market's roof. And she fed babies. Other people's babies. Market babies. The children of traders who worked the surrounding stalls. Women who had no childcare and no option but to bring their infants to work on their backs and pray the day was short. When the mothers needed both hands, they brought the baby to Mama Effiong. She held them. She warmed bottles between her palms. The specific warming technique, slow circular pressure, the bottle cradled between both hands and rotated until the milk reached body temperature. She had done this for decades. It was as much a part of her service as the oil. She never charged for the babies. The palm oil was business. The babies were obligation. The men arrived on a Monday. 3 of them. Suits, clipboards, hard hats that were clearly for show. No construction was happening, and the hats were too clean to have been near a building site. They walked through the market with a precise, brisk gait of people who had somewhere to be and believed everywhere else was in the way. They measured things. They took photographs. They stood at specific points and looked upward, at the roof, at the sky, at the dimensions of a space they were evaluating for demolition. The market knew what this meant. Markets always know. The information moved through the stalls the way water moves through sand, without channels, without announcement, completely. Mama Effiong heard it from Ia Bose, the yam seller 3 spots down, who heard it from the security guard at the south entrance, who heard it from the driver of the silver Range Rover that had parked outside. "They're tearing it down," Ia Bose said. She was standing at Mama Effiong's table with the expression of someone delivering a diagnosis. "Apartments. Luxury. A property developer from Victoria Island." Mama Effiong poured oil into a bottle. The brass cup, the steady wrist. "They have been saying that for 20 years, she said. "This time they have permits." Mama Effiong sealed the bottle. Set it in line, 5 bottles per row. "Permits are paper," she said. "Paper burns." But the permits didn't burn. The developer's name was Kenneth Adekunle. He was 52. He wore suits that cost more than Mama Efyong's annual revenue. His company, Adekunle Properties, had built 3 luxury apartment complexes in Lekki, 2 in Ikoyi, and a shopping mall in Abuja. He was successful in the specific way that success is measured by people who build things on top of the places where other things used to be. He visited the market himself on the 3rd week. Not because he needed to. His surveyors had completed their work. He came because he had learned, over 30 years of development, that the last thing you should do before demolishing a building was watch the people inside it. Not for sympathy, for information. For the specific data that surveys didn't capture. How the space functioned, what would resist, where the opposition would form. He walked the aisles. He wore the suit. He held the clipboard. The market watched him the way prey watches a predator that hasn't started running yet. He turned the corner at aisle 7 and stopped. Mama Efyong was at her table. She was warming a baby bottle between her palms. Slow circular pressure. The bottle, cradled in both hands, rotated with the patience of a woman who understood that body temperature took time, and that time was what she had the most of. Her hands. The warming hands. The circular motion. The bottle between the palms. Kenneth Adekunle stood in the aisle of a market he was planning to demolish and watched a 73-year-old woman warm a bottle between her palms. And suddenly, the ground shifted underneath him. He had not seen hands warm a bottle like that since he was an infant. Since before anyone told him the truth about where he came from. He had been adopted. He knew this, had known since he was 12, when his father, a retired civil servant who had raised Kenneth with the careful devotion of a man who understood that love was a choice rather than an accident, had sat him down and told him the truth. The truth was this. Kenneth Adekunle had been born in Mushin, not in a hospital, in a market. His mother was a trader. His father was unknown. His mother had kept him for 3 months. He had lived in the market, in a basket beside her stall, for the first 90 days of his life. Then, circumstances, the word his adoptive father used, carefully chosen, the word that meant poverty and exhaustion and impossibility without assigning blame, had required his mother to give him up. She had given him to a couple, the Adekunles, childless, middle class, from the same neighborhood but from a different economic stratum, who had wanted a child with the specific ache of people who had tried for a decade and had been told by medicine that trying was futile. The adoption was informal. No courts, no papers. An agreement between a woman who couldn't keep her son and a couple who couldn't have one. A handshake across a table, and a baby wrapped in cloth, and a promise that he would be raised well. He was raised well. The Adekunles were not wealthy. The wealth was Kenneth's. He had built it himself, from a 2-room rental business started at 24, to a construction company at 30, to a development conglomerate by 40. He had built it with intelligence and ambition, and the specific, relentless energy of a man who understood, at a level deeper than articulation, that he had been given a second chance and was obligated to exhaust it. His adoptive father had told him 3 things about his biological mother. She sold palm oil. She was in Mushin Market. She warmed his bottle between her palms. Both hands, slow circles, every time. His adoptive father had been dead for 15 years. Kenneth had not searched for his biological mother. He had told himself it was because the search would be painful, or pointless, or both. The real reason, the one he hadn't admitted to anyone, including himself, was that he was afraid she wouldn't recognize him. He was afraid that the woman who had given him up would look at a 52-year-old man in an expensive suit and see a stranger. He was more afraid that she would look at him and see her son. He stood in the aisle of the market he was about to destroy and watched the woman warm a bottle between her palms. She hadn't seen him. She was focused on the baby. A market baby, someone's child, left with her while the mother worked. She held the bottle the way she held everything, with the certainty of a woman who had been in the same place for 40 years and saw no reason to doubt the accuracy of her hands. He watched the motion. Both palms, slow circles. The bottle rotated to distribute the warmth evenly. He had been held by those hands. He had been that baby, wrapped in cloth in a basket beside a stall in this market, in this aisle, maybe at this exact spot. He left. He walked out of the market. He got in the Range Rover. He sat in the back seat and told the driver to wait. And he sat there for 40 minutes, doing nothing except breathing and trying to reassemble the internal architecture that had collapsed the moment he saw a woman warm a bottle in the exact way his dead father had described 30 years ago. He returned the next day, alone. No suit. He wore ordinary clothes, a gesture that felt like a disguise, because for Kenneth Adekunle, ordinary clothes were more of a costume than the suit. He walked to spot number 47. Mama Effiong was pouring oil. The brass cup, the steady wrist, the sunset color. "Good morning, Mama," he said. She looked up, assessed him. The assessment was fast and comprehensive. The assessment of a woman who had been reading customers for 40 years. "Palm oil?" she said. "Yes." He paused. "A liter of the special blend." She reached for the center bottles. Mama's Gold, the filtered, rested, too weak oil. She poured with the brass cup, counting the measures. "You're new here," she said, not a question. "First time in this market. You're not from Mushin." He stopped. "No, not anymore." She sealed the bottle, named her price. He paid. More than the price. She counted the change and looked at him. "You overpaid," she said. "Keep it. I don't take tips. I sell oil." She pushed the change across the table. "Come back when you need more." He took the change. He took the bottle. He stood at spot number 47, and the woman behind the table looked at him with the expression of a shopkeeper who had concluded a transaction and was waiting for the customer to leave. He left. He came back the next day, and the day after. He came to her table every day for 2 weeks. He bought oil. She sold it. He tried to ask questions, gentle, indirect, the kind of questions a man asks when he's circling something enormous and doesn't know the approach. "How long have you been here, Mama?" 40 years. "Always palm oil?" "Always." "You have children?" A pause. The first pause in their transaction that carried weight. "I have the market," she said. He heard the deflection. He heard what was underneath it. Not no, but I don't discuss it. The specific privacy of a woman who had made a decision decades ago and had filed it in a place where casual questions from customers didn't reach. He stopped asking. Instead, he watched. He came at different times. He saw her sell, the precision, the fairness, the way she refused to shortchange even when customers weren't counting. He saw her feed babies, the warming technique, the patience, the way she held other people's children with the attentive care of a woman practicing something she had once done for real. He saw her refuse to move. The demolition notice came officially on a Thursday, posted on the market's main entrance. A government document with the developer's signature, his signature, and a 30-day timeline. The market would close. The traders would be relocated to a temporary market 3 kilometers away. The building would be demolished. The apartments would be built. The market erupted. Not violently, organizationally. The Traders Association called meetings. A protest was planned. A lawyer was hired. The 3-kilometer temporary market was investigated and found to be an empty lot without electricity, water, or roof. Mama Efyong went to none of the meetings. She stayed at her table. She sold oil. She warmed bottles. She sat at the center of the storm with the specific immovability of a woman who had survived a fire, a flood, political violence, and 40 years of weather, and had not moved. Kenneth watched from outside the market, from the Range Rover, from the specific distance of a man who had signed the demolition order and was now watching a woman he might be the son of face the consequence of his signature. The paradox was destroying him. He could cancel the project. He could walk away. He could sacrifice the permits, the investment, the 3 years of planning, the partnerships, the projected revenue. He could also walk into the market and tell a 73-year-old palm oil seller that the man demolishing her stall was the baby she had given away 52 years ago. He did neither. For 2 weeks, he did neither. He sat in the Range Rover and he went to his office, and he signed documents, and he didn't sleep, and the bottle warming between the woman's palms played on a loop behind his eyes every time he closed them. The decision came from the place decisions come from when thinking has failed. The body. He was in his office. He was reading the demolition timeline. 30 days, now 22, and his hands were shaking. Not nerves, something else. Something physical. A tremor that started in his fingers and worked upward. The body's rebellion against the mind's refusal to act. He put down the document. He picked up his phone. He called his project director. "The market," he said. "Pause everything." "Sir?" "Pause. 24 hours. I need to make a visit." He went. Not in the Range Rover. On foot. In ordinary clothes. He walked through the market gates at 4 p.m., late after the lunch rush, when the market was at its quietest and the afternoon light came through the roof slats in warm amber bars. She was at her table. Spot 47. The brass cup on its hook. The bottles in rows of 5. A baby on her lap. Someone's child, sleeping. The bottle empty beside her. Warmed and given and finished. He stood in front of the table. She looked up. "Palm oil?" she said. "No." His hands were still shaking. He put them on the table. Her table. The table that had been in the same place for 40 years. His palms flat on the surface, the way a man puts his hands on a surgeon's table, surrendering to whatever comes next. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked at his hands, at his face, at the specific disarrangement of a man who had walked into her stall looking like he was about to confess, or collapse, or both. "Sit," she said. There was no chair. He sat on the ground. On the market floor, in his ordinary clothes that were still more expensive than anyone else's best clothes. He sat on the ground in front of a palm oil table, and he looked up at a woman who warmed bottles with her palms. "My name is Kenneth Adekunle," he said. She said nothing. I was born in this market 52 years ago. My mother was a trader. She kept me for 3 months, in a basket beside her stall. He paused. Then she gave me to a family named Adekunle. Mama Effiong's hand, the hand that had poured 10,000 liters of palm oil, that had warmed 1,000 bottles, that had held 200 babies, went still. The man who raised me told me 3 things about my mother, Kenneth said. She sold palm oil. She was in Mushin Market. His voice broke. And she warmed my bottle between her palms. Both hands. Slow circles. The market continued around them. Voices, footsteps. The commerce of afternoon. Around spot number 47, the world kept moving. Mama Effiong looked at the man on the ground. She looked at his hands, flat on her table. The hands of a builder, broad, strong, the specific architecture of a man who had constructed things his entire life. She looked at his face, at the eyes, at the shape of the jaw. She had served him oil for 2 weeks. She had watched him come and go. She had noticed the overpayment, the questions, the specific persistence of a man who wanted something and didn't know how to ask for it. She had not allowed herself to think what she was now thinking. I had a son, she said. Her voice was the brass cup, steady, precise, calibrated from 40 years of measuring exactly. I was 21. I was alone. The market was all I had. I couldn't... She stopped. The sentence didn't need finishing. The 40 years of not moving, of staying at the same spot, had been, in part, a kind of waiting. Not consciously, not deliberately. But the woman who had given up a baby in a market had spent 4 decades in the exact same market, in the exact same spot. And some part of that permanence, some deep, unexamined, unadmitted part, had been the hope that if she stayed long enough, the thing she had given away would find its way back. You came back, she said. I came to tear down the market, he said. The sentence sat between them. The truth of it, the specific, terrible irony of a son returning to destroy the place where his mother had waited for 52 years, filled the space between the palm oil bottles. I know, she said. You know? The notice has your name on it. Adekunle Properties. She looked at the demolition notice visible at the market entrance. I read it when it went up. I saw the name. I thought... I wondered. You knew? I didn't know. I hoped. And I hoped not. She picked up the brass cup, set it down, picked it up again. The only visible sign of a woman processing the most important information of her life. A mother who gave up her son hoping he'd succeed, and he succeeded enough to come back and tear down everything she has. Kenneth pressed his hands harder against the table. The shake was worse now. I won't, he said. I'll cancel the project. You'll lose money. I don't care about money. You should. I didn't have any. That's why you grew up with someone else. Her voice was practical. Not bitter, practical. The voice of a woman who had made a survival calculation at 21 and had lived with it for 52 years. Don't make decisions from guilt. Make them from sense. Then tell me what makes sense. She looked at the market, at the stalls, at the women selling yams and fish and cloth and groundnuts, at the babies being held and bottles being warmed, and the specific, irreplaceable infrastructure of a community that existed because 300 women had agreed to show up at the same place every day for decades. Build around us, she said. He looked at her, at the woman who sold palm oil and had never moved, at his mother. What? Build your apartments, but build them around the market, not instead of it. The ground floor, keep the market. The floors above, your apartments. She reached for a bottle, poured, the brass cup, the steady wrist. People who live in apartments need to eat. They'll buy from us. We'll be the ground floor. He stared at her, at the woman who had never left her table, proposing a mixed-use development strategy that his project directors hadn't considered because they had never thought of a market as an asset rather than an obstacle. Build around you, he repeated. I've been here 40 years. I know what stays and what goes. She sealed the bottle. The oil stays. The roof can change. He redesigned the project. It took 4 months. His architects resisted the mixed-use concept. Integrating a traditional market at ground level with residential apartments above was structurally complex, commercially unconventional, and entirely the idea of a 73-year-old woman who had never read an architectural brief in her life. But Kenneth was the developer, and the developer had decided. And when he sat in the conference room and told his team that the market stays, his expression made it clear that the decision was not open for revision. Mama Effiong stayed at her table through the redesign, through the construction, through the months of noise and cement dust that settled on her oil bottles and required her to cover them with cloth that she washed every evening. She sold oil, she warmed bottles, she didn't move. Kenneth visited every week. He bought oil. She sold it at the correct price. No overpayment accepted. They talked about the construction, about the market, about the traders who were skeptical and the traders who were hopeful, and the structural engineering required to build 6 stories above a ground floor market without disturbing the women selling yams beneath. They didn't talk about the 52 years. Not directly. Not yet. The information was too large for conversation. It lived between them the way the oil lived between the palms, present, warm, needing time. One afternoon, 3 months into construction, he arrived and she was warming a bottle. He watched. "Teach me," he said. She looked at him. At the billionaire developer. At her son. "Sit," she said. He sat. She handed him the bottle. "Both hands," she said. "The warmth comes from the center of the palm. Slow. Don't squeeze. The milk moves inside. You're warming all of it, not just the surface." He held the bottle between his palms. He rotated, slowly, the way she had rotated his bottle 52 years ago, in a basket beside a stall, in a market that he had almost destroyed and was now rebuilding around the woman who had never moved. The milk warmed. The baby slept. The market continued. Mama Effiong watched his hands. The builder's hands. The hands she had given away. She poured palm oil into a bottle. Sunset color. Steady wrist. Brass cup. 40 years at the same table. She had not moved. And finally, what she had been waiting for had come to her. Thanks for watching. If someone has been sitting in the same spot waiting for you, don't demolish what they've built. Go back. Tell us where you're watching from.